everyone, I'm back again to read another great storybook. This one is a book I just got out this week at the library. It's called The Old Ways, inspired by a true story, and it's written by Margaret Chapman and illustrated by John Mantha. It's a great book about, I don't know if you've ever heard this from your parents before, but sometimes parents and grandparents like to say this thing like, when I was a kid, and then if you're a kid, you're like, oh my gosh, it's not the olden days. But this book is great because it teaches this character here, learns from his grandparents in Inuktitut what some different things are in order to be prepared. So he goes on well, I'll read it and I'll tell you, it'll tell you what's happening. But I just think it's such a great book because it's always nice to learn about other cultures and other traditions, but also it's also good to learn from your elders, the people who are older than you in your life. And they might have some kernel of knowledge that you didn't realize they had. And maybe you'll use it when you're old, and then you'll tell your kids or your young people in your life, when I was a kid, we had to do it this way. Anyways, I'll flip the camera around and read this great book. Okay, here we have it, The Old Ways. This is a shiny cover, so the light's reflecting off there, but when I open it, you'll be able to see it better. The Old Ways by Margaret Chapman and illustrated by John Mantha, inspired by a true story. So I tried to look up some information about the author and the illustrator. I could find some stuff about the illustrator. You can go to his website. I think it's just johnmantha.com. Anyways, this is a good story about what it's like being around your grandparents. And in Inuktitut, there's different words for grandma and grandpa. Let's see. Ananaksaq is the name for grandma, and for grandpa, it's Ataatga. So try practicing those words. Okay, here we go. The Old Ways. Simon jumped off his skis and ran into the house. His fingers were numb and the warmth of the stove felt good. His grandma smiled. Good day at school? Isn't that cool? He gets to take skis home from school. He lives in Nunavut, where it's snowy like all year long, and you have to get around on skis and snowmobiles and sleds and that kind of thing. Simon nodded. I got to use the computer today. Ananaksaq shook her head. Computer, she said, as she poured him some hot milky tea. Maybe she doesn't use a computer. She might not need a computer yet. What's for dinner? Simon was hoping for pizza or macaroni and cheese, but he could already smell caribou stew. His grandma sipped her tea while Simon told her all about his day. We saw a movie this morning. It was great. What was it about? A magic fish that grants a fisherman some wishes. That reminded Simon's grandma of an old story about Sedna, the goddess of the sea, and she started to tell it. Simon jumped up impatiently. Sorry, but my show is on. And Ananaksaq, he hurried to turn on the TV. After his show, Ananaksaq said, homework time. Simon opened his backpack and started his math. Before long, Simon's grandpa stomped through the doorway, shaking off the snow. Would you like me to show you how to build an igloo today, he asked. The snow was perfect. Simon sighed. Ataatga and the old ways again. He's not interested in learning that kind of stuff, I guess. I wonder why. No thanks, Ataatga, said Simon. I was just going to play my video game. His grandpa looked disappointed. Video games, he said. Well, maybe another time. Then he brightened. Tomorrow we're going to Aunt Mary and Uncle John's in Inuktitut for Aunt Mary's birthday dinner. It's just a short snowmobile ride. Simon grinned. Aunt Mary's big family was fun. They always danced and sang and played games. It is really fun to go to family gatherings and see all your cousins and different people in your family. In the morning, Simon watched his grandpa getting ready. Ataatga attached a sled to the snowmobile and loaded some big leather bags onto it. Simon heard the clanking of the tools and knives from inside one of the bags. Then his grandpa added a large gas tank to the container of oil. Ananaksaq got the warm caribou parkas and put them onto the sled. Finally, she brought the box of food to take to Aunt Mary's. Ataatga piled some snowshoes on top, covered everything with caribou skins, and tied it all down. Why do we need all of this, Ataatga? Simon asked. You said it won't take us very long to get there. You never know, said his grandpa. We have to be prepared for anything. Silly, thought Simon. Ataatga is still stuck in the old ways. Well, not me. Simon began dreaming of the new video game he wanted for his birthday. I wonder what your favorite video game is. My kids are really into Splatoon these days. Everything was ready and they set off. It was cold and blowing a bit. Snow swirled in a little round pattern in front of them. Suddenly, Ataatga stopped the snowmobile. Open water, he muttered. We'll have to take the long trail. See the water there? Peeking through the ice? Because they're snowmobiling on the ice. And then there's certain spots where maybe it's melted or shifted and they have to go a different direction. He veered off in another direction. It would be fun to ride on a snowmobile like that, all tucked in together. They drove in silence for an hour. When there was a loud bang, the snowmobile stopped. Ataatga jumped off and tinkered with the motor. Nothing. There were 2 frown lines between his eyes. The snow was blowing harder. Simon couldn't even see the tracks of the snowmobile now. That would be a bit scary, wouldn't it, in that blizzardy snow? Not knowing where you are. We're in for it, said Ataatga. He wrapped Ananaksaq and Simon in the caribou skins from the sled. Then he opened a bag and took out a snow knife. He cut snow blocks and placed them in a circle. He placed a second layer on top, a little bit smaller. Slowly, the walls went up and curved over Ataatga's head. He left a smoke hole at the top. That's so they can build a fire. Ataatga asked Simon to stuff snow all around the blocks to make sure no cold air could get in. He told Simon to leave one bottom block so that it could be used for a door. They all crawled inside. Ataatga brought in a seal oil lamp and lit it. Simon was surprised at how much heat it gave off. Soon the igloo felt warm and comfortable. Look, they're sitting there watching as he's building it. And he has a special knife for cutting the snow. And when the snow is a certain thickness and moisture, a certain amount of moisture or a little amount of moisture is in it, they can cut these blocks and they stay together and make a really cool block, and then they can build a house. The igloo to keep them warm. I'm hungry, whispered Simon. His grandma brought the box of food from outside and made some bannock. She cooked it over the flame and handed it to Simon. Then she melted some snow for tea. Simon settled down in the caribou skins. There was nothing to do. I wish there was a TV, he thought. Ananaksaq started to tell a story. It was all about a woman who adopted a polar bear as her son. This time Simon listened. He could see the story in his head. Ataatga was listening too, and so tired and warm Simon dozed off. He dreamed of polar bears flying through the sky. Simon woke up a short time later to the sound of low voices. It's still too risky to go for help, and I don't want to leave you both alone, Ataatga told Ananaksaq. We'll wait until the storm stops. Simon's stomach skittered. How will we ever get home, he wondered. I wonder what they're going to do. It is pretty cool, though, that they can stay warm in this nice igloo with their caribou skins, and they can tell stories and entertain themselves and eat their tasty food. And look, they even built like a cool stand with this anchored in the wall of the igloo to hold up their kettle to heat their food. It's good to learn how to be able to take care of yourself when you're lost or stranded somewhere. Ananaksaq told another story. This one was funny, about why the raven is black and the loon is speckled. Simon laughed and felt better. Ananaksaq heated up the caribou stew she had brought. Simon dipped his bannock into the gravy and wolfed every bit of it down. It tasted better than ever. Finally, he slept, wrapped in dreams and caribou skins. In the morning, they crawled out of the tunnel. The storm had stopped. The snowmobile was covered in snow. Ataatga tried to start it. Nothing. Uncle John will find us soon, he said. We'll just wait. So they waited all day, but no one came. Ataatga kept going outside to check the skyline. Night fell, and they finished off the rest of the stew. Luckily, they brought enough food because the grandma thought that was a good thing to do. She was prepared. And bannock is so tasty too. It's like kind of bread that you can make in a pan. It's so yummy. Simon's grandparents looked worried. There was no more food, but they were warm. And Ananaksaq had more stories. And another day was coming. The next morning, Ataatga went outside and gazed at the empty horizon again. They must be looking on the other trails, he said. He got out his compass. It's about 20 kilometers to Inuktitut. I'll start walking there. There are lots of Inuktitut on the trail to show me the way. Simon was afraid. He felt safe when his grandpa was there. You'll be fine, said Ataatga. You're warm and dry. I'll be back soon with help. Be brave for your grandma. Ataatga strapped on his snowshoes and crunched away into the flat horizon. It would be kind of scary being left out there because Simon isn't used to living that way, so he's not sure what's going to happen. Simon and his grandma went back inside the igloo. Ananaksaq told many tales that morning. They helped him to forget about how hungry he was. He heard about the crow who brought light to the north. Simon was lost in a world of magic and history, and the hours went by, and his stomach growled. Ananaksaq looked tired, and she was running out of stories, so Simon told her the story of the magic fish from the movie at school. He tried to make it really interesting the way she did. He changed his voice and waved his arms. Ananaksaq smiled and gave him a hug. You're a great storyteller, she told him. The sun was sliding lower in the sky when they heard a shout. They scrambled out of the igloo. 2 snowmobiles hummed toward them, with Ataatga on one and Uncle John on the other. Quickly, they packed everything onto the sled and attached it to one snowmobile. They hooked up the broken snowmobile to the other and set off, with Simon sitting behind his grandpa and Ananaksaq behind Uncle John. I just wanted to look at this beautiful illustration for a second because look at the light that's glowing from inside the igloo, and you can see it coming through these beautiful cracks. And the sun setting over the horizon is making this beautiful pink and blue and purple color. This illustrator has done such a good job of making the snow look like real snow, how it reflects light. When they arrived at Aunt Mary's, everyone was there to greet them, and as Grandpa lifted him off the snowmobile, Simon said, Ataatga, I think I would like to learn more about the old ways. Tomorrow, will you show me again how to build an igloo? Simon's grandpa smiled, a very big smile. You bet I will, he said. And that's the end of the story. So now I'll flip it around, we can talk about it. I love this book because it really teaches you about how usually the best way to learn something is when you have to learn something. They were, Simon's grandparents wanted to teach him certain things like the stories from their heritage and their past, and also lessons about like how to build an igloo and how to prepare for a long trip. But he wasn't really interested in learning those things because he's never needed those things to keep himself safe or entertained. So the best way for him to learn those things was when they got trapped out on the ice. All of a sudden it was about survival. And so then he really did need to use those skills. He needed to learn how to build a shelter, and he needed to learn how to have food along to keep him full and have caribou skins to keep him warm. And he needed to have those stories to entertain him because he didn't have TV or video games. So I don't think this book is saying that it's bad to have TV or it's bad to have video games or computers or, have macaroni and cheese and pizza and that kind of thing. But it's also really important to learn the skills that we need for when we're in an extreme situation. So maybe in this case, in your life, it would be remembering to bring a coat with you when you go in the car, because what if your car breaks down and you're going to be stuck in the cold? Or I don't know, bringing snacks along if you have to go on a long drive and you might get stuck somewhere and you need food. And maybe there's some cool things that your grandparents can teach you about things that happened when they were young. I always love asking my grandparents or my parents what were some of their best memories from when they were little, because there's always some really cool, interesting nuggets of information that you can get from them. So why don't you do that the next time you see somebody who's older than you in your family? Ask them what was their favorite or 2 favorite things from when they were a kid, their most memorable thing that they remember from when they were little. And I bet they'll get all bright-eyed and they'll say, oh, when I was a kid, this thing happened and I couldn't believe it. And you'll get a really cool story out of them. So I hope you enjoyed the book, and keep looking at the library for cool stories. You'll learn so much more about life and other cultures and expand your mind and embrace all kinds of people in the world by learning and growing your brain. All right, talk to you soon.